So here's the question of the day. Are you a manager or are you an operator? And that's going to be our topic today. So I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network, where we here at CVC Success Group share ideas, concepts, processes with you that hopefully take you much closer to that dream you had the day you started your business. My name's Jerry Eisenhower. I'm on today with Cheryl Eisenhower and Josh Kelly. And we've got a topic we're going to discuss that affects every home service business owner, manager, and leader. And that's the question of the day. So here it is. Are you a manager or are you an operator? Now, before you get in and answer that too quick, let's talk about what we mean by this. An operator works in the business. A manager works on the business. And while every one of you, including myself, started as an operator, you need a business that grows, it scales, and becomes valuable. And organizations like this are built by people who learn how to become managers and leaders. Today, we're going to explore why so many home service companies get stuck, how to recognize whether you're operating or managing, and more importantly, how to transition working in the business to working on the business. And let me be real blunt. There's a lot of people that worked as operators for years and they decided to exit one day. And guess what? They had a business they could not sell because it didn't have the value. It wasn't what buyers are looking for. So let's roll into it today. You know, you're probably started out as a technician. You were probably a great technician. You might have been an HVAC technician, a plumber, an electrician, a roofer, and you built your reputation based on your technical skill. Then you probably hired a helper, then another technician. Then you got around, hired an office person, then salespeople. And before long, you know what? You got a company. But here's the problem. Many owners never stop operating. Instead, they become the architect of the business. They remain the chief technician. They continue to run calls, solve every problem, handle every upset customer, approve every decision, answer every question. The business becomes dependent on them. They are the business. The owner isn't running the business. In actuality, the business is running the owner. Does this sound familiar to you? You know, so many people wonder, I'm working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And we keep questioning, why are we so exhausted? And the answer is they haven't made the transition from operator to manager. One of the most important things you can ever have as a business owner is a business that can operate without you. And if you're ever going to sell this business, you know, right now, there's a lot of talk about private equity. And they're looking for things. They're looking for companies that have systems, companies that have a high EBITDA, high nets. They're not interested in coming in and running the business. It's quite simply the way it is. So as you hear this talk about private equity, you got to remember, for private equity to be interested in you, you got to be able to show them a company of value that they want to buy. So Cheryl, what's your thought on this of operator and manager? What do you think that sets that out there for us?
Well, it sets the bar really high because a lot of times if you've made the business from scratch, I mean, literally brought the baby up to where it's a grown child, it's hard to give it up. I was one. I was one that followed that. It was hard to give up the control. So I think what a lot of times it's a lot of it's just the way we're built, the way we're started, and I sometimes think the younger you start, the harder it is because you stay in that operator's mode a whole lot longer. People that buy into the business, as a rule, they become the owner and worker or get out of the workforce, become a manager a lot faster because they haven't worked into the day to day, so it's not their critique. So I think sometime a business that's sold may live more in the management side than the operator side, but it's hard. It's really hard to give up your child. A lot of times, I do believe.
Here it is. And I want to show you something. And this is something my daddy had that gave me when he was still living. I want you to look at this. This is the handcuffs. My daddy was a policeman. And what my daddy did, he used these when he arrested people. And my daddy arrested a lot of people. But the reason I'm showing you this is this what's happening in your business? Are these handcuffs holding you back? Is that there? So, Josh, what's your thoughts on this thought process? Owner or manager?
Um, so manager should be really enforce, what is your level of detail you want a manager? Are they just enforcing your systems or are they running the business? I think that's where you have to, or, put things in perspective. The manager, the owner should be setting these, in my opinion, what I did is I set up the systems for the manager to run. So that way I could go on vacations and step away and do those things. And maybe the manager helps you set those systems up as they see things and as problems evolve. And as one of the ways that you always evolved your system was customer complaints and where did we fumble. So that's kind of my thought on that.
And it is. And Josh, let's clarify something. Whenever you worked in the business that you did, the business was actually owned by your mother. So your mother had built a business and she was expecting you to be the manager, and your mom had a lot of freedom. She and your dad traveled a lot. They had a motorhome, they went around. So they had actually developed a business and they were depending on you to be the manager. Am I saying this correctly?
Well, I would say I was a lot more than the manager, Jerry, because I handled everything and I wrote all the systems. I put everything in place. There was no systems. There was nothing written down.
Right.
So
And that's
I would
what
say I did a lot more than that.
right. But that's what I'm getting at. They depended on you. And that's what people have to have is someone that can do this. So let's compare the two. What's the operator? The operator asks, what do we need to do today? Their job's on, they focus on the jobs today, the emergencies, the scheduling, the customer complaints, the production. The operator is focused on the activity. The manager, however, they're looking what systems need to be improved. They're focused on the people, the processes, the system, the training, the accountability, the growth. And the manager's looking at the results. The operator solves today's problems. The manager prevents tomorrow's problems. The operator creates income. The manager creates value. The operator works harder. The manager works smarter. So, Cheryl, back to you. What's your thoughts on what I just said?
I totally agree. And it's, again, it's the position Josh was in. He had to basically know it all. And that is where I think you've got to get your manager too. And it's the thing about it is finding the person that can do it. But yeah, each has their own seat. You really can't swap a lot of the projects. You have to do what's in your seat, and you have to value. If you are the owner, you need to value that manager because he is the one that's going to give you freedom. He's the one that's going to take away your daily problems, and he's going to work on a lot more than just what's happening on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
So he is working on what's happening Monday and Tuesday. You're working on what's going to happen in the next year.
Yeah. So, Josh, what's your thoughts on what I just said?
Well, I always think about fire codes. Why do we have fire codes? Because we kept having fires, right? Why did we start building buildings in New York out of brick? To prevent more fires. So your fires are your SOPs, and whoever your top level person is, that's what they're thinking about. What system broke or what system didn't we have that could have prevented this issue or this piece of waste and made an unhappy customer.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we had someone they're in an area where he just says, if you haven't had service in 5 years, it's a pot assembly. I don't care, because it's an extra $150, and it's, there's a 98% success rate of making sure the appliance is going to work the first time. And
So,
if the customer doesn't like it, they can move on.
yep. So, what's the signs you're still an operator? So I'm going to ask these questions to answer each of them honestly, because if any of these sound familiar, you're probably more of an operator than you are a manager. Do your employees constantly come to you for answers? Do customers call in and ask for you by name because no one else can solve their problems? Do you take calls, work calls while on vacation? Can your company function for 30 days without you? If you disappeared tomorrow, would operations cease? Does every major decision fall on you? Do you ever say this? It's faster if I just do it myself. If you answered yes to several of these questions, your company may depend on you. And dependency is the enemy of growth. The goal is not to become less important. The goal is to become less necessary. So think on those questions as they go through. So Cheryl, your turn again. What do you think about all this?
I think you said the major word there. I think a lot of the fear of moving from the opera or the owner to the manager is the fact of you don't feel as important a lot of times. You kind of feel like you've moved to the background. You're not dealing with the day-to-day stuff. And so I think a lot of times, even though you move out of that, a lot of people move back into it just for the sense of working with the business again. It's different. Different people feel different ways, but I think I see that a lot of times that they just feel like, again, nobody can do it as good as they can, so they start sliding back into that position. And I think that is where they start having the problem, number one, because the person that they put in charge under them starts to feel like they don't believe in them and don't trust them. So there's a fine line there that you have to draw the mark in the sand and stay on your side.
Got you. Understand. Josh, your input at this point.
You said something about being less necessary. I just had a conversation with a manufacturer's rep, and he was pretty frustrated because he can't get information directly to the salespeople who needs it, and there is a log jam at the managers where even product updates have to go through the managers, and it's becoming a real problem because now the salespeople just keep reaching out to him for the same information over and over and over. And he's outside their company, right? Like he shouldn't have to be doing this hand holding for them, because the managers have now log jammed it. They, instead of just having a filter, it says, okay, automatically filter this message out or just forward it out to where, hey, we got a price increase or a new price list, or however you handle the price increases, that becomes, a real issue. So having these little systems in place where you are less necessary and that you can automate these decisions for your people becomes a real necessary. Like, why couldn't you go to the manufacturer's website and find that information? Why'd you have to call somebody? That was always, one of my favorite sayings, Jerry, is how many monkeys does it take to fuck this football? And the answer is one, usually. Why did the salespeople like to handle off customer service calls when they can handle them? Then it becomes, well, I told so-and-so, part of it. But why bother someone else when you could do 20 seconds of research?
Got you. So, one of the key business books that I believe every manager, every owner should read is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, because this is actually the basis for the E-Myth. And this is what Gerber said. Most owners spend nearly all their time working in the business. And what does that mean? They're running service calls, they're selling jobs, they're scheduling, they're answering phones, they're solving the daily issues. These activities are important, but they don't build a company, and they certainly don't provide a company of value that someone wants to buy, because they don't want to buy a job, they want to buy a business. Working on the business includes creating systems, building your training programs, developing your leaders, reviewing your financials, strategic planning, marketing planning, recruiting, setting goals. And yeah, some of them are boring. Reviewing financials, yeah, that's something a lot of people don't like to do. But when you look at it, one activity creates income, the other activity creates a future. Imagine spending every day cutting down trees. You're busy, you're productive, but eventually you become exhausted. Now you spend some time sharpening the saw. At first, it feels like you're slowing down, but eventually every swing becomes more effective. Working on the business is sharpening the saw. And there's an old saying about Abraham Lincoln. And they asked Abraham Lincoln, if you were going to cut down a tree, how would you do this most effectively in an hour? And he said, I would spend the majority of my time sharpening my axe. And that's what you're doing when you're working on the business. You're sharpening your axe. So, Cheryl, your thoughts on what I just said?
Hey, I agree with it full heartedly. And I was going to share what you did about Abraham Lincoln. I mean, this is not a new theory. This goes back for many, many years. And I don't think people look back at history enough to realize a lot of these answers are already out there. Just got to do a little bit of research. You've got to understand why companies fail. Many companies that just have a owner that works in the business all the time, they're going to eventually fail. And I think that's shown within history and the way things have come down in the past. And I think if we've moved forward in times, it's not one man bands anymore. It's companies. And again, are you selling a company or are you selling a job?
That's it. And that's why I said that to start with. I've seen some people that have built extremely successful businesses as far as generating income, but they couldn't sell the business because the business was dependent on them and they never could sell it. They ended up selling off the assets. Josh, what's your thoughts on what we're talking about?
Well, I just had a conversation this week with somebody, and we were talking about hourly rates, and something came up with a latent defect in construction. He's like, "Well, what should I charge them?" They're kind of close. I said, "Well, what's your normal rate?" He said, "Price A," and I said, "Well, that's below market." He's like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm little and this, that, and the other." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're working 80 hours a week too, um, and you're complaining to me that your back's killing you. You can't take care of your health." And this is a relatively young guy in his 30s. Uh, no gray hair on his head yet, Jerry. He still has a head. I would say he had a heavy hair, but he voluntarily shaves his head, is what he tells me.
I understand.
Um, but I'm like, so you're telling me if we just raised your prices by 30%, you could get 40% of your time back, and you would make the same amount of money. What is that worth to you? Because he's like, well, I'm having trouble finding people. What do you have? You ran the ad? Well, no, I don't have time to do that. Yeah. Why is that? Because you've made yourself busy by being the cheapest and running yourself into the ground. And where does that going to get you, at the end of the day here? But if you raise your price up enough, you can probably, get some of that life back too, and then build from there as well. Because, good people are going to want good pay as well. Good people aren't going to come for dirt pay.
That's it. That's it to the nutshell. It's just like, I had a conversation this morning with a client, And one of his biggest problems have been the low sales conversion he had, the low sales conversion. So he has spent the last 3 weeks out on a truck doing sales. And he went through a process and developed a process that his closure rate had went up to 80%. Josh, I told him, that's pretty phenomenal. What do you think about an 80% closure rate on your proposals?
That's amazing.
It's truly amazing. And he had done some things and made some drastic changes in the presentation, and it's working. It's working. So these are the areas that every manager must focus on, because you got to understand, you got to focus on your people. Great companies are built by great people. They are not built by energy vampires that suck the energy out of other people, folks. Energy vampires are ruining companies. They're focused on their recruiting, their training, they're developing, they're retaining, because your people, your team, it's the greatest asset you have. If you cannot repeat it, it can't be scaled. Documented processes, creating standards, building consistency, leadership. Leaders develop leaders. Managers build teams. Operators build dependency. Financial management. Managers know their numbers. They know where the money is coming from. They're tracking the performance. They're reviewing KPIs. They're making decisions using facts, not feelings. This is really interesting. At our house, we have a tremendous speeding issue beside our house. And I had a conversation with law enforcement a few days ago, and they have put data collection devices out here on the road that is collecting the data of how many people are speeding going up and down this road. Never heard of such a thing, but they're actually seeing what time of day speeding is occurring so they can put speed traps out here. Strategic planning. Where's your company going? What will it look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? If you don't know where you're going, neither does your team. This is where SWAT meetings come in. I've got 2 scheduled for next week. And that's what we're looking at. What's working? What isn't? What's the weaknesses? Threats out there. Those are the type things. Josh, I'm going to go to you first. What do you think about what I just said?
That's a lot to take in. Weaknesses that we're going to retain this in the term of a SWAT. They're hard to hear for sure from your employees. You know, it'll feel like you're failing. That's 100 for sure. So I always looked at weaknesses as an opportunity to improve. You know, you brought the shit. I'm right here. Anyone that knows me knows I like my knives, right? I got a knife sharpener right here in my desk. Right. I've got a knife sharpener with the kitchen knives, and I probably have an uncomfortable amount of money invested in knife sharpening that would make most people uncomfortable. Right. I was on a medicine that I can best describe as I was still myself, but I was making stupid mistakes. Mistakes I normally wouldn't make was the best way I could describe to my primary care provider. Was I'm used to being tip of the spear sharp, and I was dull. I didn't feel dull, but I just made mistakes I normally wouldn't make. But I looked at it as a way to improve, because, I mean, one of the best analogies I ever heard is a business is like a dam, and you just have to keep plugging all the holes, plugging all the holes, plugging all the holes, and plugging all the holes, because this earthen dam is always going to need something. New salespeople always challenged me in new ways I didn't think was possible. was always what I would say. We'd have a new salesperson come on and they would challenge me in a way that I just didn't think possible. They would challenge me to think in a way I didn't know how to think, which was good and bad. It would cause me to go back and look at systems and cause me to improve them. If you have that failing forward mentality, you'll actually go really, really far. People ask me all the time because I have ADD, and they're like, "Well, how did you get all this stuff done? How did you write all these SOPs? How did you get this done? How did you get that?" And I was like, "Well, I was just angry all the time." Um, and I'm still angry to some point, but I, my goal is to stamp out stupidity, but that'll never happen.
Okay. Cheryl, your thoughts on all that?
What I'm going to do is back up to last week. I think the thing that a person that owns a business, that's working in the business, the first thing they need to work on is their playbook. And people can find that in last week's episode, what a playbook is with everything on it. I think he needs to get his playbook written. Then I think he needs to find that magical person that can manage the playbook. And he needs to back out and make sure everything's good. Look at everything from 50,000 feet instead of trying to look at it standing in the room with everyone. And I believe 99% of the businesses that are worked by the person that owns it would eventually become great businesses with great employees and a great company altogether, and a sellable company.
A company of value. That's it. So you transition from operator to manager. Here's a recipe for you for listening to me right now. Here's your challenge. Look at your calendar, and over the next 30 days, the next 4 weeks, block out 2 hours every week. For these 2 hours, you're not available for service calls, not for estimates, not for customer issues. You're going to spend these 2 hours exclusively working on the business. Shut your office door and turn off your phone and don't look at your text, your Facebook, your email. Review your financials. Take a look at your recruiting and what you're doing to bring new people in. Look at your training. Are your people taking the virtual courses that you've assigned them to? You might be shocked. They're not. Your systems, your leadership development. Protect that time. This is your most important appointment of the week because the future of your company, building the value you're wanting to build, is going to depend on this, folks. It's going to depend on this. Cheryl, your turn. What do you think about that?
I think the first thing that happens when you tell your client to do that is going to be, but the one call that I was needing to get all day long will come in within those 2 hours, and I'll miss it. And he's got to get over that. Those are 2 hours to take away their, everyone needs them basically to get their mind back, much less to make their company go forward. But there's always that thought that says that one phone call, that one job, that one thing. But someone else can handle that one thing. You just have to have that person.
That's it. Josh, your turn. What do you think?
Well, today's a great day to sit outside, smoke a cigar, and work on your 2 hours and turn your phone off. I will tell you, one of the, as you know, I do a lot of jiu-jitsu now, 5 days a week, and being able to just take my phone and put it in the cubby and walk away. I mean, that's priceless, right? That's one of the things, like having that clear head, getting that opportunity to clear my head, because the only thing I'm thinking about is for an hour straight is, who that person is going to try and kill me over the next 6 minutes. And how am I going to kill them? So that becomes, it's mind clearing. So it can be done. Um, some of the most successful people take, that 2 hours can be self-care, a week. But if you don't take that phone, put it away and get it done, and just literally take the phone away. My wife will tell you, when I'm not on this, I have a premium sound system hooked up my computer, and it's cranking in here when I'm trying to get work done. Um, and that's my goal, is to just block out all the noise and just get shit done. So you got to do it. Go to the cigar bar. That was one of my favorite places to go and write and just be in the corner.
That's it. Sometimes you just got to find your special place where you can think and do this, where you can think and do this. So to close out this episode, I'm going to leave you with some thoughts. I'm going to go to Josh and Cheryl after I get done and see what their closing thoughts are on today's episode. Keep in mind the following. When you're a technician, you create jobs. When you're an operator, you create income. When you're a manager, you create systems. And when you become a leader, you're creating a future. The businesses that survive and thrive are not built by people who do everything themselves. They're built by people who create systems, develop leaders, build organizations, and these organizations can succeed without them. So ask yourself these questions. Am I spending most of my time working in the business? Am I investing enough time working on the business? Because the moment you make that transition, everything starts to change. Your growth changes, your profitability changes, and your freedom changes. And ultimately, the value of your business changes. So that day that you decide it's time to exit out, you got to plan for that day and put it all together. You're going to meet with private equity, see what their offer is. You got to be looking. Do you have something to take to them? Do you have something to take to a private buyer? Do you have something of value? Cheryl, your turn. What's your closing thoughts on the day?
My closing thoughts are I would say those first 2 hours that you actually decide to take, get out of the office. Like Josh said, go out and sit on the deck. Go somewhere where you're not going to be disturbed and decide which one of those brackets that you just discussed do you want to be in? Do you want to make it a company? Do you want to run a company, or what do you actually want to do? And I honestly do not believe you can do it sitting in your office. I think just like everything else, you need to clear your space. I had one lady that when she had to think, she would go in a closet and sit in the dark in the closet. It doesn't matter what you have to do it and get it done.
Got it. Josh, your closing thoughts on today's topic.
Those hours, those are going to be your, most important time getting out of that business and working on these things. I did a lot of this stuff I would start it in the evening when I got home. Unfortunately, I would sit with the laptop, and I would just kind of play with it, plug at it, play with it, plug at it until I got it right before I went to bed. And that's how I did a lot of that stuff, was just businesses closed down for the day, phones are off. I've seen some places, some businesses where the phones never actually turn off. I'm like, have it where your phones turn off. This is not uncommon. You don't have to have 24/7. Your customers don't need 24/7 access to you. Especially in this day and age, it's super easy to get a second, call it a VoIP phone number, to where that line doesn't ring 24/7. Also, as you very well know, Jerry, AI answering agents, for that stuff as well, can take care of that. Has been really starting to come on. So you don't have to be there 24/7 anymore. You don't have to have, I'm hearing things of like, so and so texted me at 11:30 last night, and I'm like, I've told you, you get a separate business line. You know, this is the. I'm an early morning person. If you're gonna text me 11:30, I'm texting you back at 4 a.m. Like, I'm gonna be that guy. If you want to text me while I'm sleeping, I'm gonna text you while you're sleeping. Let me see if you enjoy it. But have that where it does shut off.
Got you covered. So that's our thoughts for today for you. Think about them. There were some critical questions in our episode today. Ask yourself those questions, because overall, if you own a business, there's probably going to come a day that you want to exit out. And you can't just make that decision tomorrow. I want to exit out unless you prepare for this and you've got something of value that someone will buy. You've got to have that. I don't care if it's private buyer, family funds, a competitor, whatever it is, you got to have something of value if they're going to buy it. That's the way it is. So I want to thank you for joining us this week. We hope this has been a time of value for you. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of the CBC Home Service Success Network. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor. It's a privilege and pleasure as always. See you next week. Have a great weekend.